In sports, hindsight is always 20/20 when looking back at decisions made in the past, and even though certain moves may have made sense at the time, they don't always work out as intended. The NBA Draft is an event that offers hope for the futures of all 30 NBA franchises because the ability to land the next big star can come with any of the selections made. With that being said though, the teams that pass on the next big star will probably end up regretting their decision down the line, and this brings us to the topic of today's video. We started on this trend last video and are now moving on to the next year, so go check out that last video if you missed it, but today we'll be taking a look at the 2019 NBA Draft Lottery, and 3 years later, we'll be giving a grade to each selection made based on how the pick has worked out since then. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting things off, the New Orleans Pelicans selected Zion Williamson first overall, and the grade here 3 years later is an A-. Zion has had an incredibly rocky journey through 3 years, so putting a grade to it was honestly pretty tough, but despite all of the ups and downs, his talent still shines through when he's on the court, so ultimately taking him first overall is still deserving of a good grade. It's not a perfect grade, as you can see it's not an A or an A+, but it is close as long as Zion gets back to his prior form and continues to produce at an elite level that he's shown he can. There are legitimate injury concerns as he's played just 85 games through 3 seasons, but his talent makes it at least a little bit worth it as long as he can fix that moving forward. Next, with the second pick, the Memphis Grizzlies selected Ja Morant, and the grade here is an A+. The Grizzlies landed themselves a superstar talent and franchise cornerstone who has already elevated them to heights nobody could have foreseen so soon, and they got someone as good as he is with none of the health concerns that come with Zion Williamson, so the A+ was an easy decision. The Grizzlies were a rebuilding team expected to be a few years away from being able to compete for anything meaningful, but Ja Morant came in and led them to the playoffs in his second season, and then in his third season led them to having the second best record in the entire league. Zero regrets here, as it was arguably the best pick in the draft. Next, with the third pick, the New York Knicks selected RJ Barrett, and the grade here is a B+. Barrett was viewed as the consensus third best prospect in the draft at the time that it went down, and even though he hasn't proven to be the third best player in the draft after 3 years, he has still been pretty good, showing solid progress in each season that he's played. He's coming off of a season where he scored 20 points per game, he's the Knicks' best perimeter defender, typically guarding the opposing team's best player, and has flashed some good passing talent too. He needs to continue to work on his consistency shooting the ball from the outside, and his overall shot selection, because he makes just 41% of his shots and 34% of his threes, but all in all, at 22 years old, he's doing very well in his role. Up next with the fourth pick, the Atlanta Hawks traded for the pick and took Deandre Hunter with it, and the grade here is a B. The Hunter pick just felt safe at the time, and 3 years later that's exactly what it was. He was the ideal 3-and-D mold of the class, and that's what the Hawks needed at the time, so to that extent it has worked out because Hunter is a solid defender that spaces the floor and plays his role well, but his ceiling is much lower than other prospects from the class, and when you're drafting as high as 4th overall, you don't get rewarded with great grades for going with the low-risk, low-reward option, even if it has worked out, and he has been a productive contributor for them, so a B seems fair. Next, with the fifth pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Darius Garland, and the grade here is an A+. Garland has taken huge strides as a point guard in each of his 3 seasons, and now he's proving to be a star-caliber talent that can produce on the same level as some of the best point guards in the league. He's coming off of a season where he averaged about 22 points and 9 assists per game, he shoots the ball efficiently both inside and out, and he got nominated for what should be the first of many All-Star games he'll be a part of throughout his career this past season. When you're drafting in the top 5, you're hoping to land someone that can become a star for your team, and that's exactly what the Cavaliers accomplished here. Next, with the sixth pick, the Timberwolves traded for the pick and selected Jarrett Culver, and with it, the grade here is an F. Unfortunately, in back-to-back selections, we see the exact opposite ends of the spectrum as we go from an established star to someone on the verge of becoming a draft bust. In each of his 3 seasons, Culver has seen his role on his team grow smaller and smaller, and his play on the court just hasn't shown much, if any, improvement to make teams interested in investing themselves in his development. The Timberwolves traded him to the Grizzlies last season, and he barely got any minutes, and now he's still unsigned as a free agent as we speak. As a prospect, he was viewed as a player who could give you a little bit of everything, but the issue with players like that is he was never necessarily good or great at any one specific thing, and at the NBA level, he couldn't find an area he could contribute in consistently. Next, with the 7th pick, the Chicago Bulls selected Coby White, and the grade here is a B-. Coby White was drafted under the assumption he could one day be the team's starting point guard of the future, but through 3 seasons, that just does not look very likely anymore, especially now that they're back to being a playoff contender. Last season was the first time the Bulls had legitimate playoff squad, and White settled into a 6th-man role where his scoring talent was utilized most heavily, and as a bench scoring threat, he is definitely valuable, but that now seems like his realistic role moving forward, hence the slightly above average grade. Next, with the 8th pick, the New Orleans Pelicans traded for the pick and selected Jackson Hayes with it, and the grade here is a C. Hayes is an incredible athlete for a big man who moves well and elevates high above the rim for finishes, and on defense he's coming along as a rim protector, but after 3 seasons, he's still incredibly raw overall and inconsistent as a performer on the court. He's someone who averages 9 points and 4 rebounds off the bench, he finishes well around the basket when opportunities present themselves, but he's going into a year next season where he's about to have even more competition for minutes at his position and could find himself on the outside looking into their rotation. Next, with the 9th pick, the Washington Wizards selected Rui Hachimura, and the grade here is a B. Hachimura came out as a rookie and provided some balanced offensive production with a solid face-up game, but struggled a bit defensively, and now 3 years into his career, he really hasn't improved much if at all as a player, but he was good from the start, so it's a weird conundrum. He's a decent secondary scoring threat who has improved his 3-point shot, but while his percentages went up, his overall scoring went down, which tells me he's best utilized in a smaller role where he can contribute in spurts. There's nothing wrong with players like that, it's a good pick, just not a great one. Next, with the 10th pick, the Atlanta Hawks selected Cam Reddish, and the grade here is a D. Reddish was a raw prospect, but had the ideal build to develop into a modern-day wing player with his physical profile that can dominate both ends, and he had a few flashes at Duke that led people to believe that he could become a dominant scorer down the line. But now, after 3 years, those inconsistencies are still there in his game. He never really managed to break into the Hawks rotation on a regular basis, and eventually the team traded him to the New York Knicks, where he found himself in an even smaller role this past year. We're still waiting on him to have his breakout year, and time is definitely ticking. Up next, with the 11th pick, the Phoenix Suns selected Cameron Johnson, and the grade here is a B+. I'll be honest, at the time of the 2019 draft, I thought this pick was a bit of a reach, but sometimes playing it safe at the end of the lottery can work out for you, and this is a perfect example of that being the case. Johnson is a fantastic 3-and-D wing player for the Suns and plays a huge role on the team that just finished with the best record in the league. He shot 43% from 3 last year, he scored about 13 points per game, and he's a pick that has just really worked out well considering the circumstances. Next, with the 12th pick, the Charlotte Hornets selected PJ Washington, and the grade here is a B. Washington has been a solid stretch 4 throughout his career, who has probably been a little bit underrated at times. He reliably knocks down threes and plays good defense, plus he crashes the glass. He's not a flashy player at all and doesn't command touches consistently to be effective, but he's a solid player nonetheless that they found at the end of the lottery. Next, with the 13th pick, the Miami Heat selected Tyler Herro, and the grade here is an A. Herro has definitely outplayed all expectations put on him through 3 years, and was an outstanding selection for the Heat here. He broke out in the bubble, helping the team make it all the way to the finals as a rookie, then he just finished last year as the winner of the 6th Man of the Year award. He's an efficient 20-point scorer that provides a much-needed scoring punch for one of the best teams in the league, and that kind of skill set is obviously always a home run to find, especially at this pick. And finally, the last pick of the lottery was Romeo Langford by the Boston Celtics, and the grade here is an F. To put it simply, Langford hasn't really made much of an impact at the NBA level yet, and the Celtics ended up packing him in a trade to the Spurs last season, so he is no longer with the team. Maybe a fresh start in San Antonio will help him get back on track, but in hindsight, this was a pretty bad pick when you consider how much talent was available later on in this draft. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below how you would grade these selections from 3 years ago. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.